Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Sophia Adam, and I am the Communication Manager in the Institute of Communications and Computer Systems based in Athens, Greece. I would like to welcome you all to the 11th webinar within CAD's webinar series. This webinar will deal with the European research project L3Pilot. In the next hour, we will have the opportunity to attend 4 presentations by Sarah Metzner, Satu Inama, Merja Pentinen, and Barbara Mentz on the topic a methodology for piloting automated vehicles on European roads. Before starting, I would like to present to you briefly the CAD initiative and the purpose of the webinar series it organizes. The CAD, the Connected Automated Driving Initiative, is a joint initiative by 2 European research projects, CARTRE and SCUT, and supports the development of clearer and more consistent policies on connected and automated driving in EU member states. It has 30 members and around 40 associated partners from research, the industry, and authorities. And its main goal is to bundle European and national actions in order to accelerate deployment of automated driving. For this, the CADRE coordination and support action structures research outcomes by 11 thematic groups: connectivity, socioeconomic assessment and sustainability, industrial production, human factors, big data, artificial intelligence and their applications, digital and physical infrastructure, in-vehicle technology, sorry for that, in-vehicle technology enablers, safety validation and roadworthiness testing, policy and regulation, new business models, and finally, user awareness, societal acceptance, and ethics. All these groups explore enablers of art and formulate position papers and public consultations. Let's now say a few words about the CAD Initiative's webinar series. Well, the CAD Initiative's overarching objective is to establish thorough public-private collaboration on art. The exchange of data, experience, and knowledge for comparing and deploying the results from pilot is very essential for achieving this goal. And this is the rationale behind the CAD webinar series. For up until now, 11 webinars have been organized to create a solid knowledge base across European stakeholders. These webinars present different art projects, bringing together experts from policy, industry, and research in order to showcase the richness of European activities in the field. An important note, CAD is about to end its research activities as well as its webinar series at the end of September, at the end of this month. However, we would like to inform you that its vision objectives will continue for another 3 years, and another webinar series will be settled via the project Arcade that is going to start in October. Now, here you can see some ways on how we can stay in touch. Of course, you can revisit our webinars. 11 webinars have been organized and implemented so far. You can join our last webinar, which is about to take place at the 25th of September, and its topic is about the Interact project, and more specifically, the title is Design and Incorporate Interactions of Automated Vehicles with Other Road Users, the latest developments of the project Interact. And of course, we can get involved with us. Carter builds a diverse expert network across Europe and beyond. You can revisit the recording session, this recording session in further material in CAD's website. Share your thoughts and opinions on CAD's Twitter account at EuropeCAD. You can subscribe to our newsletter and, of course, to become an associate partner to the project via this email, partnership@connectedautomatedDriving.eu. Well, that is all from me. I would like now to give the floor to L3Pilot's contributors. Just to let you know that we will take questions and your feedback at the end of the presentations. So please note your questions, indicating the presenter's name, and you will have the chance to express them later on at the end of the talks. I would like now to give the token to Sarah Metzner from EICT, the European Centre for Information and Communication Technologies, who will make a short introduction to L3Pilot project. Sarah, do you want us to help you share your screen?
Yes, thank you. I will take over if you could support me in sharing my screen.
Great. Let me introduce you to the attendees for a little bit. Let me say a couple of things about you. As said before, Sarah Metzner is from EICT, the European Centre for Information and Communication Technologies. She functions as L3Pilot Dissemination Manager. She joined EICT 9 years ago and has been active in predecessing projects such as Adaptive and Interactive. And Sarah holds a degree in sociology and is a communications and dissemination expert for large-scale collaborative innovation in the field of automated driving. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Okay, so hello everybody, my name is Sarah Metzner, I'm with the EICT, and I would like to give you a brief introduction to L3Pilot, to the project we are talking about today. One second, please. I have difficulties in moving my screen. My apologies for this. I will change.
Sarah.
I will change the. It will take me 1 more minute.
Of course, no worries.
I should be back now. Can you see the screen?
Yes, everything seems fine.
Then I will continue.
Okay.
In brief, What we do in L3Pilot is that we will bring 1,000 drivers with 100 equipped cars on real roads in 10 European countries. This also includes cross-border activities. In the map you see here, you see which countries are involved in the tests, in the real testing on public roads, and also you see which countries are included in the cross-border activities. With an L3Pilot, we build upon the experience of previous projects and the results from those projects, such as adaptive. In adaptive, we developed and tested and evaluated as well automated driving functions. We built up 9 demonstrators with automated driving functions. And also for L3Pilot, we built upon EuroFOT. EuroFOT was the first comprehensive field operational test on public roads in Europe. Now, in L3Pilot, we focus, as the name says, on SAE level 3, but we will also access some level 4 functions. To give you a brief or short impression about how big L3Pilot is and what efforts need to be done to realize a pilot in Europe, here are some facts about the project. We have a budget of 68 million euros, thereof being funded 36 million euros from the European Commission. It will take us altogether 4 years to realize the pilot, and there are 34 partners from altogether 12 countries involved in the project. We made sure that we have the relevant stakeholder groups within the project integrated as partners. We have a user group, we have authority, we have insurers, and we have all major European OEMs included in the project, the suppliers and the leading researchers. SMEs are supporting us with special services. Now, in the end, let me also give you a brief overview about what we do exactly, how it breaks down to the work in L3Pilot. At first and in the beginning, you need to prepare a pilot. And this is where we come to the point about what we are talking today about. We develop a methodology. We also build up a fleet. Then when it comes to the real driving, you need to have tools to deal with the data you are receiving from the tests. And also, you need to organize the piloting itself. Then, once we have conducted the tests, the data needs to be evaluated, the driving, the results need to be evaluated. And all the time, we keep in mind that we have a deployment focus. We will develop a code of practice for automated driving, how to develop the respective functions. And in the end, we will have created a Europe-wide piloting environment, and we will provide results for user studies and also from business studies so that we can make sure we meet the user's needs, and also that we explore business perspectives deriving from automated driving. And these are the 4 application areas we are dealing with in L3Pilot. This is the traffic jam, motorway, parking, and the urban area. Again, thank you for your patience and thank you for your kind attention. And now I think we should go into the details of our work.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for this so interesting overview and key facts of the project. I would like now to give the token to Merja Penttinen from VTT, the Technical Research Center of Finland, who will present us the setting experimental procedures for the pilots of the project, as well as the objectives of its methodology. Let me first say a few words about Merja. Merja Pentinen works as a principal scientist of transport and mobility at VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. She has over 20 years of experience in ITS-related user needs, user acceptance, impact assessment, and HTI studies. She is currently leading the work package of experimental procedures in L3Pilot. So, Merja, you have the floor to begin.
Yeah, thank you very much,
Okay.
Sophia.
Welcome.
So can you also promote me to be the presenter, please?
Okay.
Okay, I hope you can all see my screen now. So in the slide, as you see, it's my colleague Satu, who is leading the whole methodology sub-project in L3Pilot, but unfortunately she had another meeting today, so I'm kind of giving her presentation as well. So try to keep up with me.
Maria, sorry to interrupt, but I can't see your screen. I don't know if others
I can see it. I think that it's a Satui Nama presentation here, right?
Yes, it should be
Okay.
saying that. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Thank
it is still my screen. Yes.
Thank you, Merja.
Okay. Yeah. Then let's go forward. So it's a little bit slow to change the slides. Yeah, now. Okay, so first of all, the overall objectives of the methodology part of L3Pilot. So the overall objective is to develop a solid and multidisciplinary methodology for L3Pilot to achieve reliable results in the evaluation in L3Pilot level. And how to achieve that? We need to, of course, start with the state of the art and the theoretical background, and then to cover both the direct and indirect, and also the positive and potential negative effects of AD functions. And at the end, we also provide the input for the code of practice, which is now going to be updated from the code of practice for driver support systems to the code of practice for automated driving. So the methodology part of L3Pilot covers the Festa V, the left side, so the prepare part, and then the piloting covers the lowest part, the drive, and then of course the evaluation is the right-hand side part. But we do have very close cooperation with different sub-projects and different work packages in the project to make sure that we are not only planning something theoretically, but we are also taking into account what is possible and then trying to fit the hopes and then the offerings from the OEM side together to get the L3Pilot level results at the end in the evaluation. In all, the methodology part is divided into 3 consecutive steps. And basically the first step is so far done. So we started from theories and mechanisms, impact mechanisms, and also the function descriptions as we see them at the moment. From them, we made together the research questions, also the hypotheses, and then from the hypotheses, of course, we can also create the logging needs that are now kind of going to be then implemented into the logging systems by another sub-project. Then the second step I'm going to talk you soon more about is about the experimental procedures. And maybe I'm not using that much time in this slide since I have another presentation of that coming soon. The third step you will also hear more about today from Barbara later. That's the definition of research methods for all the research questions. And Barbara will give you more extensive presentation of that part later on. And then finally, this was kind of the very short introduction to the methodology sub-project overall. And next, I will take just a minute to change to my other presentation, which is actually then mine. So please give me a couple of seconds to change the presentation. Okay, I hope you see my screen again. So now I'm going more into details in this second step of methodology, which is to setting the experimental procedure for the pilots. So basically, the main objective is to provide a solid evaluation methodology that can be implemented throughout the pilot sites. So of course, in practical level, the main goal is to guide and to help the pilot sites to harmonize their data collection as much as it's feasible, to ensure that at the end, the evaluation part, which is the right side of the FESTA V, can then provide a holistic L3Pilot impact evaluation. And as the first step, we have created the overall testing plan. And then the second step will be then walking through all the pilot sites and then fitting the overall plan to the pilot site level. So that's the work still ongoing. The overall plan is more or less kind of described. So as in Satu's slides, this was step 2 in the methodology creation. And what belongs to this experimental procedures? So basically, it is more or less getting the kind of the solutions to how to collect the data, from whom we should collect the data, when and where to collect the data, and in which kind of circumstances, which kind of weather, and so on. And then at the end, when we have collected the data, then comes the scaling up, and then also the input for the code of practice, which of course the actual scaling up will then happen in SP7 when the results from the pilot sites are ready and when we have the additional data sources to be used. But the methodology is kind of selected and described in SP3. Overall, of course, as many of you know, there are very wide variety of different approaches that could be used when collecting the data from the pilot sites and from the pilot tests. And they are varying from let's say driving simulator to naturalistic driving studies, and it's kind of what we are selecting, that kind of we need to find the balance and make sure that overall we get the data that is kind of enough to SP7 or the evaluation part to make the evaluation. We know that the external validity is increasing when we go in the picture towards right, so towards the naturalistic driving study. But then on the other hand, we cannot control things very much when we are in the naturalistic driving study, but in the driving simulators and test track, we can control much more in which kind of situations we take the driver into, and what are the kind of the details of the functions of the AD there. But that's again something we need to be aware of, and we need to plan ahead, because we will basically utilize all these different approaches in different test sites during the L3Pilot data collection. So the second step, from whom to collect the data. So of course, when we want to have a representative sample, then we should basically pick the people to the tests that are representative to the general public. However, we also know that at the moment when we are not in a field operational test, we are actually in a pilot project. That also means that some of the OEMs still do have the functions under development, so they are still in the kind of prototype level. So in that sense, again, we need to find the balance, what is feasible and what is needed to make the assumptions towards the general public. So we try to get as much as possible variation of the backgrounds, and also trying to include the subjects that are not aware of the systems too much beforehand. Of course, they need to be instructed how to use the system, what are the limits of the system, and so on. But the pilots will be kind of, especially in the pre-piloting period, the tests will be started with very experienced drivers to make sure that we are on the safe side all the time. Of course, then the other things that we'll be taking into account is the driving experience of the drivers, and also when it comes to the kind of willingness to pay for and willingness to use and possible mobility impacts and so on, then we need to use more or less the general public as subjects. And luckily we do have many ways to collect the data. So we are having the kind of objective measures from the pilots, but we also use the subjective measures such as questionnaires for the pilot users, and also which is kind of EICT is kind of then also having the annual survey that gives the, let's say, the widest audience for us to give their opinions on the level 3 automated driving functions. Then when it comes to the experimental designs, then basically we could also describe that as a framework for data collection and analysis. And in that part, we need to make the selections if we are collecting and comparing the data between subjects. Also, we are kind of using the control and the treatment group, or if we are collecting the baseline and the treatment, so let's say manual driving and automated driving data from the same drivers. And so we could call them like before, after measurements, or without measurements. Anyway, so it's important that we do have the baseline to compare with, otherwise we cannot really say what are the impacts of automated driving. And this is something we have been very carefully discussing with the pilot sites when we have been visiting them now during the summertime. Another thing is that luckily we do have a 4-year project. So basically the test drivings can be organized during the long period of time, and hence we can take care of the kind of external things such as weather and the time of the day and so on. It depends a little bit on the test site how long a driver is driving per one round. But then luckily we also have the test sites that do have the possibility to collect more naturalistic data, or then repeat the data collection many times, meaning that even if the number of the drivers may not be at the one point very huge, but then we get a lot of data and a lot of events from which we can then make the evaluations with. And of course, it's important to kind of also define what kind of measurements we are using, what is the order of the measurements, and then definition of events. So what are we comparing in the automated driving? The experimental environment, so the test environment is very important as well. So for instance, in which kind of weather we are collecting the information or the kind of the impacts. Some pilot sites are at least starting during the daytime and during the kind of good weather conditions, but we also include some of the data collection in rain and in a somewhat reduced visibility. So that has been already promised that it will be possible. We are very carefully taking into account the geographical location, also the road type, so how many lanes and how many carriageways it has. Also the traffic conditions, so if there are kind of so what is the traffic density, for instance, or traffic flow, and then also if there are kind of other road users, only kind of vehicles around, or then as in urban areas, other road users as well. And this all is linked to the scaling up principles, because basically when we want to know the impacts in European level, then we need to know how representative our experimental environments have been compared to the European level driving. Then, as the part that is now very heavily ongoing, we have the practical support for the test sites ongoing, and as the kind of small picture here tells, it's really a teamwork. So far we have been visiting more than half of the test sites, and it's really kind of, I would say, intensive discussion of the goals of the methodology planning, the impact evaluation, and then the possibilities of the test site. And also it's kind of it's not like mandating what the test site needs to do. It's really kind of a bilateral discussion, like with the guidance, how much we can kind of ask from them, and what are the restrictions they are facing. Can they have the externals, or is it company employees? Do they need to start with professional drivers? And that's all something that we can partly have impacts from SP3 side. Partly those are the legal issues that needs to be kind of taken into account and recorded to make sure that we are taking those into account later on when making the impact analysis. And I think that was my last slide. Thank you so much.
We thank you, Merja. Thank you very much. Now it's time for the final presentation for today. Barbara Metz from the Würzburg Institute for Traffic Sciences is going to present to us the evaluation method that is implemented by L3Pilot for takeover requests. Barbara, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Of course we can. Let me introduce you to the attendees. Dr. Barbara Metz works as a principal scientist of human factors at Würzburg Institute for Traffic Sciences, a private research institute located in Germany. She has experience in simulator and field studies, for example, on driver state or on users and acceptance of in-vehicle systems and automation. She is leading the work package that defines the methods of L3Pilot project. So, Barbara, you have the floor now.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen? I hope.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so the presentations before presented more on a higher level what is going on in L3Pilot, what the whole project is about, and especially what the work package and methodology is about. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going a bit into more details. I would like to present one of the methods to you that we decided to use in L3Pilot. And this is a method that can be used to evaluate takeover situations. As you already heard, L3Pilot plans to evaluate level 3 functions with regard to various aspects, for instance, with regard to user evaluations, or they plan to look at the impact on driving behavior of these functions. And one of the aspects that is analyzed in L3Pilot is the impact of the functions on driving safety. And as I hope, or I assume that most of you also know, is that level 3 functions always assume that the driver is still the fallback solution for the function in case something unexpected happens, or in case the vehicle comes close to the boundary of the functionality. So for instance, it gets close to the exit of the highway, or there is some unexpected event that the function cannot handle. And in that situations, there will be takeover requests. So the control of the vehicle is handed back to the driver, and now the driver has to take back the control of the vehicle and has to solve the situation safely on its own. And so if you want to evaluate safety of such functions, one important aspect is if these takeovers can be handled safely by the drivers, or if something, or if this is critical. What makes this topic difficult in L3Pilot is that there will be various implementations of level 3 functions. So it will not only be one or it's the same function that is tested, but there will be motorway pilots from various OEMs with various setups and also various design of the takeover requests. Then it will be testing in real traffic. So this means there will be expected and unexpected takeover requests. That means at the end of the functionality, so before an exit, but also probably unexpected ones in case, for instance, there are no more lane markings available. And since this is real traffic, these situations will not be controlled. They will vary between instances. And this all makes this evaluation of the takeover situations quite complex. We decided to use a method that was developed in another project that's called the Takeover Controllability Rating, TOC rating. This is a video-based approach to evaluate the takeover situations. It was developed in a German research project called COHAF that deals with cooperative, highly automated driving. It was developed in that project in a cooperation of BMW and us. And in that project, but also in other studies, we validated that method, but up to now, mostly in driving simulator studies. And we could show that there's a high inter-rater reliability if you use that method. And we can also find correlations with objective driving data. So all in all, it seems that the approach is quite valuable to evaluate takeover situations. So how does this method work? First, it is important to know that the driving situation is evaluated as a whole. So you look at the driving situations and you look at the behavior of the system, you look at the reaction of the driver, and you also look at the impact of the driving situations on itself. That means maybe impact of the infrastructure, impact of other participants driving next to the driver, etc. And what you then do is that you take this video sequence with the takeover situations and you watch this video several times. And then you have a defined hierarchical process on how to come to a final decision about the controllability of this situations. So first you look at it and decide if it was controllable, yes or no. That means if there was an accident, if the driver left the road, something like that. So some really severe event in that situation. If you say no, it was, yes, it was controllable, there was no accident, then you decide if there was some critical situation, if there was some endangerment, either to the own vehicle or to some other vehicle. And if again you say, okay, there was no endangerment, then in the next step you code driving errors or imprecisions on defined dimension. And based on that, you come to an overall rating of the controllability. Furthermore, since the idea of the rating is that in the end you have one value that gives you a rating for this one specific situations, but you also have the possibility to have comments or to mark down reasons for certain events, so that if you look at it into more detail, for instance, to adapt your takeover requests, you have the possibility to do so. So here you see how this overall rating in the end looks like. You have a rating on a scale between 1 and 10. 1 is perfect. 10 is in case of an accident or an uncontrollable event. And in between, there are different levels or categories. You can have good driving or solution of the situation, but with some imperfections in driving. You can have a reduced performance or driving errors, or you can have endangerment or critical situations. This is done with the help of a defined and pre-developed coding sheet. So here you can see on the bottom the scale that gives you in the end the final rating. And here you can mark just cross what you can see in this situation, if there was some collision or lane departure, or here if, for instance, on the dimension of braking responses, if the driver missed to brake or brake too late, things like that. So there are predefined dimensions, also predefined categories that are already linked to a certain rating on the scale. Okay, now if you decide to use that takeover controllability rating in your study, what do you have to do? First, for sure, you need to select the video sequences with the takeover situations. In L3Pilot, the idea is to do that based on vehicle data, because we plan to log in the objective driving data every takeover request, and then we can use that to select the takeover situations. Then if you have multiple scenarios, you have to define more or less comparable start and end points. That is easy in a driving simulator study. It is more complex in data collected in real traffic, but the points should be chosen in a way that you are sure that you can see the development of the situations before the takeover request, and that you can also have a chance to evaluate how the driver gets back into the driving task after the control is handed back. You need for the rating unit video data, for sure you need a video of the driving scene. In real traffic videos, that means a view of the scene in front of the vehicle, and also a view of the scene on the back of the vehicle, to evaluate if, for instance, the driver got too close to the vehicle behind. Then you need, in case you do not have the information from objective data, a view of the HMI elements to see what the function does. And you need a view of the driver's face and how he reacts. Okay, so let me move on with some more, just to show you with some examples. How does this detail look like? You can see here for uncontrollable events and endangerments, what is available are precise descriptions of events that are either counted as uncontrollable or as endangerment. They're all related to a TOC rating. And there's also a description, a detailed description in words available, so that you can get a common understanding of what is meant. What is also available if you want to use that, there are some videos available. So here is one video. Situation of endangerment, what could it take over? As it take back, and as here it was quite close to the vehicle coming from behind, and she also did not look in the mirrors, so she did not check for oncoming traffic or traffic from behind. And this, since it was not a collision, but it's very close, this would be probably a 9 on the scale, so it was a very critical situation. If we're not talking about critical situations or accidents, but if you're talking about driving errors or imprecisions in driving task, where several dimensions predefined that are considered in the evaluation. That is the longitudinal control, including the braking response. It's a lateral control of the vehicle. It is looked at lane changes and also at the lane choice of the driver. It is evaluated if the driver secures the situations appropriately and how he communicates with other road users. It is looked at the vehicle handling, if that is somehow hectic or whatever, like looks not so sure of himself, the driver. And it also looked at the driver state and the driver reaction. And for all those dimensions, there are already predefined detailed evaluation criteria available that can be used. So there's one example that's for the lateral vehicle control, where you can have, for instance, imprecisions. This might be imprecise lane keeping or like jerky steering, a bit hectical. If this gets stronger, we are talking about errors in driving. This can be strong oscillations in the lane. It can also be that the driver leaves its own lane, crosses the lane marking, or gets very close to other objects or other vehicles on the side. There's one example for such an error in lateral vehicle control. See her taking him back, but she has problems staying on her lane, and she swerves in the lane. So nothing seriously happened, but it definitely was not a good takeover response. And here, one last example for those categories. That's the dimension of security and communication. There can be imprecisions in that category. So that is the unnecessary use of an indicator or use of the wrong indicator, or maybe switch between left and right indicator use in a situation. There can also be errors. That's the missing use of an indicator, or that it's used very, very late. But it's also a missing securing of other vehicles. That means no control glances to the mirrors or to the side, etc. Again, one example video. You can see here he's using the indicator to the right side while he is staying on his own lane. So that would be an unnecessary use of an indicator. Nothing happens, but it's not a perfect takeover performance. So I hope after these examples, it's now a bit more clear to you all how we plan to evaluate these takeover situations in L3Pilot. As you've seen, already available are a lot of things that makes this method also quite useful for L3Pilot, because we do not have to develop it. We already have a standardized coding protocol. We can rely on a defined process on how to come to the overall rating. We already detailed criteria for the evaluation, and there's lots of training material, including the videos, so that also potential raters can get a feeling on how to use the categories. Now, a short outlook of what is planned in L3Pilot. If you want to use that method, we, in the first step, need to train all partners who plan to use that method, and we will do that based on available material, and presumably this will be done in a workshop with all partners, and then they can use the material to maybe train students who later on code the videos. But then for sure we need to apply the defined process to the challenges in L3Pilot, because up to now it is mainly developed for driving simulator studies. Now we will have takeover situations in real traffic that might pose some extra challenges. We will deal with different prototype functions, and we also will have mainly professional drivers, at least in the beginning in the study, but that is more an issue for the interpretation of the results. And then the idea is, since we have developed that, or BMW and we are both partners in L3Pilot, I think we will also bring our experiences back to the developing team and try to integrate these experiences into the method and maybe adapt it to, where necessary, to real traffic situations. So thank you all for listening to our method. Now it sounded a bit like my work, but that's not true. You can see here my colleagues who developed the method from BMW and also from B4B. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I would like to thank all the presenters for the so fruitful presentations of today. And now it's time for your questions. Who would like to start? My colleague from FIA just tell me that there are no questions so far. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes in order to write down your questions, indicating the presenter's name. Any questions?
Hello here. We have one question to Barbara. The question is, could you provide again the published citation described to Could you provide again the published citation describing the methodology?
It was on one of the slides, the presentation, but I guess you will put the slides online after the webinar. There's also the link on the homepage for the takeover controllability rating, and I think there you will find a lot of extra information, also more videos, information on if you want to have training, how you can get it, and also I guess also on the publication. It's an open access publication, my colleagues tell me. So maybe we can also link it with the slides. I will check.
There is another question also for Barbara. Do you have statistics or do you plan having them available regarding the most important issues that fail good takeovers?
In L3Pilot, probably. I mean, first of all, the idea is that we will provide in L3Pilot in the end, in the public deliverable, information on the overall quality of the takeover reactions. If it comes to failures and problems, then it might be tricky because a lot of OEMs are involved, and I'm not sure how much of this can be public in the end. Maybe a summary of the, as you've seen, the different categories that will be marked in the takeover controllability rating, and maybe we can provide some combined statistics over all OEMs of these type of errors, etc.
There is a question for Merja regarding the participant is asking, I want to know that where and when will you deploy AVs on test sites?
So of course, we are not deploying the AVs on test sites. So the deployment is ongoing all the time. So it's kind of what is the role of the methodology part is to support them in organizing the tests in such a way that we will get the data that could be harmonized or could be then analyzed to kind of become together the holistic evaluation data for the L3Pilot. So the deployment is ongoing and part of the functions are already deployed.
There is another question that is open to all speakers and is which are the selected roads for the real life testing? In which type of roads do you think L3 automations will be first allowed?
Well, if I start, so there are different functions that will be tested. Most of them will be tested in two carriageway roads, so without oncoming traffic. But I'm definitely not in the position of saying that which will come to the market first. But let's say most testing will happen in that kind of environments.
And there will also be some parking functions, but they will work only on private ground. So I guess then it's more a question of development of the function and less of legal aspects, bringing them onto the market.
Any other questions? Any other questions for today's presenters?
There is another question. Is the post-TOC driver performance measured only in quantitative terms, or are you planning to assess it in this is only on qualitative terms, or if you are planning to assess it in quantitative terms as well? speed perturbations, lateral oscillations as well.
The idea at the moment is to mostly measure it with this takeover controllability rating. The reason is that there will be various situations that are uncontrolled and that cannot be repeated with several drivers. And if you try to compare driving behavior data from completely different situations, that's mostly not feasible, because also the driving aspect of driving behavior that makes the criticality in a certain situation that varies between situations. So it's very difficult to compare that and to combine that across situations.
There is another question. Will you suggest to collect any empirical data such as speed and flows for AVs and node AVS? Any video data from drone cameras or dash cameras would be collected?
Yes, to put it shortly, yes. It depends a little bit on the test site, but mainly, yes, these so the loggers are installed, and the data on speed and position and the accelerations and such things, including the camera. So basically, for instance, the traffic situation will be then achievable based on the camera pictures, and it depends a little bit on the kind of installation by an OEM, but there are also cameras inside the vehicle.
And there is a last question. Are TOC situations seen as potentially more dangerous than fully automation L5 situations?
Sorry, can you repeat the questions? I think I didn't really get it.
It said, are TOC situations seen as potentially more dangerous than full automation? L5
okay,
situations.
now I understand. You mean if the system requires takeovers, if that is in theory more dangerous than having a complete automation? I mean, that's quite difficult to answer, because I mean, the safety of a full automation depends on the functionality and how good that functionality is. So, I mean, if you have a fully automated vehicle that can drive safely, it might be overall safer than a system that gives the control back. But as long as the systems cannot provide that level of driving performance, it is for sure safer to give the control back, because otherwise I think also OEMs wouldn't do it. If they would feel to drive through that situation, they would do it. So it's really a fallback solution.
Yes, thank you. Another participant has mentioned that Barbara showed a bird eye views to be used in the TOC method. How to realize such bird eye views in real traffic? They're asking.
Okay, that's for sure not possible. I mean, that's up to now, it's mainly used in the driving simulator, so we can have that view. But we've also done it already with other views. If you only have the frontal scene and the back scene, but not the bird's eye view, that also works. For real traffic, it means that you probably need to have at least two views, one to the front scene and one to the rear scene. And then you just need to consider both videos in the evaluation. But that's one part of this adaptation process.
Mm-hmm.
We also need to find out.
There is a question on how many automatic vehicles are expected to be tested in each test site in real traffic conditions on highways.
That will still to be defined. So of course all the OEMs have started or kind of gotten quite far with the installations development, but the pre-piloting is ongoing, and of course based on the experiences from the pre-piloting, then the development goes on. So it either concentrates on getting the 1 or 2 or 3 vehicles in the state where they want them to be, or then to kind of replicate the same kind of installations to several vehicles. But anyway, the testing period will be 1.5 years. So even with a smaller number of cars, we will get the opportunity to get a high number of mileage.
Okay, we have to finish. Thank you all for participating. If you have any other questions, you can send us by email, and actually feel free to do that, and speakers will come back to you with their answers. Keep in mind that you can revisit L3Pilot's webinar in CAD's dedicated website in the webinar section. There we are going to upload all presenters' presentations as well as the recording. So thank you all for being here with us, and most of all, thanks all the presenters for their time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.